12 Faces of Sober Speaks podcast, episode 57. I am your host, Kenneth L. Watson Jr. Ladies and gentlemen, we have another wonderful guest from the sober community that I met on IG. And let me tell you, not only is this person really near and dear to me, she's near and dear to a lot of people in the sober community in terms of just the energy that she brings, the positive quotes, the support that she gives in the sober community, but especially in the Black sober community, because we seem to forget about that a lot of times. There's nothing wrong with talking about that openly, and we're definitely going to do that in today's episode. It's definitely important. I noticed that there's not a very large representation of people of color in the sober community, but we all seem to kind of have mutual friends, and that's pretty much how we met. I had followed Christina based off of someone else's page as far as a recommendation, excuse me. And as soon as I clicked on, like I said, her videos are very funny. She's out there dancing. She's falling, so it's letting you know that, okay, she's not editing her video. Well, she's probably editing some of them, but she's being herself. And that's truly what, the sober community to me should be about, is being yourself and not, accepting those mistakes and the faults that you have. And so before we jump into the interview, I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of some updates. I know I haven't been doing podcasts lately. I have actually relocated from the Florida, Georgia area to now back in Minnesota. Hopefully this will be the last move that I make. No telling, but at least I'm here now. And let me let you guys know that I'm in a better place. I have my own apartment, and there are a lot of good things that 12 Faces of Sober has been doing these last couple of months. Slowly but surely, I will be revealing them, but not everything, because there are some things that should be kept kind of private. But like I said, if you follow me on Instagram, you might be able to kind of piece together what I'm doing as far as my videos, especially because I'm moving around the Twin Cities, and a big shouts out to the Minnesota State Fair. That's going on a couple blocks from where I live right now. So stay tuned for a video of that. But let's jump into the interview. Like I said, Christina she has been sober since March 15th of 2020. Congratulations on that. Congratulations on being very transparent and sharing not only with myself, but others. And I know that your social media handle, or at least on IG, is geared toward the sisters. But
Right.
we're going to touch on that as well. I know that it's not only for sisters, because like I said, I was enticed by going to your page and just seeing the things that you're doing. And like I said, it not only inspires the women, but it also inspires the men. So welcome to 12 Faces Sober Speaks podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I really appreciate you inviting me on.
All right. Now, so why don't we start with a little bit of a background on yourself? Where are you from? What was it like growing up? Was alcohol present in the home, or is that something that you kind of experimented with later on in life?
Yeah. So I was born in North Carolina and I grew up all over the Southeast. Spent a little bit of time in Chicago and a little bit of time in California, but mostly on the Southeast. I reside in Georgia now. Growing up, I had a really good childhood. I had a good support system within my family. There was drinking in the home, but nothing excessive, nothing that would have contributed to my alcoholism later in life. I did experience some trauma as a child. I was sexually assaulted from a very young age and experienced that for quite a while, from 7 to 13. That obviously did contribute, but at the time I was unaware of how that was going to impact my life later on. Like I said, I did move around a lot. I stayed in North Carolina until I was about 7, and then we moved almost every 2 years until we got to Georgia. My parents actually did move me to California for about 6 months. When I turned 18, I said, peace out, I'm moving back to Georgia. It was over winter break of my senior year in high school. And I've been in Georgia ever since, always been a little bit of a rebel. My parents might have regretted allowing us to be really free spirited and, just kind of creating our own way in life, and that kind of backfired on them a little bit. They love me to death and I love them. We have a great relationship, but that allowing that kind of freedom kind of affected them a little bit. But like I said, growing up, my household was very secure. I grew up with both my parents in the home. I'm the middle child and the only girl. I have an older brother and a younger brother. We have a very, very tight extended family. Always grew up with my cousins and aunts and uncles. Even though we were traveling a lot, my parents made sure to keep us involved in their lives and everybody connected. So lots of time with cousins, lots of time with aunts and uncles, grandparents. It was an amazing time as far as my family unit. I will say though, as a child, you don't notice these patterns of things, even within my family where there is alcoholism present and it was known, but there was still drinking going on like we typically see. Celebrations, you got a cookout, you got a graduation, you got a birthday, somebody's going to the liquor store to get alcohol. And although there was never anybody excessively drunk or crazy things happening, it was always there. So from a young age, I did expect that it was acceptable to have a drink, to celebrate, to have a good time. If you've had a hard day at work, to come home and have a drink. Those things were visible to me. Again, never showing up in a way that made me feel like, oh, this is something wrong, but that this is an acceptable part of being an adult. My grandfather was an alcoholic and he passed due to that. And that was very known within my family. But as we see in a lot of African American families and in the Black community as a whole, although we all knew, although it was talked about, it wasn't actually talked about in a way that said, maybe we should all do something different. We are making a change. We tier ourselves. We've got tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. I'm tier 2. All of my parents and aunts and uncles are tier 1, and tier 2 is really making an effort to have those hard conversations with each other, me and all my cousins, about the alcoholism that is present in our family, and to break those chains. Let's do something different than what was done previously. We know that our parents and our grandparents did the absolute best that we can, and we don't hold any judgment against them in that regard. But it is important to talk about these things so that we can make changes. I have a cousin who is, I believe, 90 days sober, right at the 90-day sober mark herself. And me and her talk all the time just to encourage each other. And we're two people in the family who said, hey, we noticed we've got a problem and let's make a difference.
Hmm. No, I like that point that you made about the certain tiers in the family, because I second that. I don't use that exact term, but I will say that I definitely like that, because that's kind of how it was for me. It was the same way. Like when I was a kid growing up, I noticed that my great uncles, when I would go to Mississippi for the summer, and my grandmother would be like, "Oh, that's Uncle so and so. Oh yeah, he's drunk. Don't pay him no attention."
Right.
But as a kid, of course, like you said, we're not processing those things.
Yes.
And as an adult, it was like, okay, now here I am. I'm the drunk of the family, and I'm that uncle now. I'm the
Yes.
uncle that's doing that same exact thing. And it's
Right.
like, now is that okay? I'm making the change. The changes in my life. And I was just having the conversation yesterday with my mom about it, with someone that my nephew hangs out with, and I'm like, is that sometimes we're afraid to have those conversations.
Absolutely.
We'll push it on, or we'll make fun. Oh yeah, Uncle so and so, they're drunk. Auntie so and so, oh that's cousin so and so. But instead of having that real heart to heart conversation, like, look, this might actually be a problem, and what we need to do to actually fix it. And see, that's kind of how it is for me. Is that like now I'm, I guess, in that tier of the 40 and up bracket as far as my family, and so it's like most of my cousins now, they all drink for the
Right.
for the most part. So it's like I'm the one that's going on social media like, hey man, you might want to cut that out. Hey, don't post that. You might be having drama with your boyfriend or girlfriend, but don't post it on social media. If you
Right.
got the issues, work on it all, offline. So I definitely like that. So when did you actually start drinking? Did you experiment at all before you became that rebel at 18? Or
Yeah.
was it something that once you broke away from the family, and now you're out there, living that young adult life?
Right. The first time I ever tasted alcohol, my dad had a beer in the freezer that had exploded. I was probably 7 or 8, and I was just curious. So I tasted it, and it was disgusting. I was like, this is gross. I'm never going to do that again. And I didn't for a really long time. When I became a teenager, around 16, 15, 16, I really started experimenting with alcohol. Kind of just, being a dumb kid thinking nobody was going to find out, going in my parents' liquor cabinet and drinking. I used to, it's so gross. I used to put liquor in milkshakes and drink them that way, and then I'd go fill the bottle up with water and like act like nobody would know.
Yeah.
Like they were going to know.
Mhm.
But it wasn't anything excessive in high school. It was just, experimenting here or there. I was a rebel in the sense that I was always going to do things differently and kind of form my own path. And I guess the big thing that happened in high school was I fell in love with a girl, and my parents were not on board with that in the beginning. And that was a struggle. I was like, I don't really care what you think. I'm going to be with her anyways. And that was why when my parents moved me to California, the minute I turned 18, I said, I'm going back to Georgia. I'm going to be with the love of my life. And when I moved back was when things started really heavily picking up. I was working in the restaurant business because, it's an easy industry to get into. And as we all know, I was bartending and serving, and drinking is so heavily a part of that culture. Having a couple drinks after the shift, having a couple drinks on shift when I was bartending, coming home with the rest of the kitchen crew or the front of the house crew and, drinking with everybody after hours, barely sleeping to get up the next morning and do it again. I did have goals and aspirations for myself. So I was going to college. I was still in everyone else's eyes, there wasn't a problem. I was going to school. I had what I thought at the time was a healthy relationship. I was taking care of myself. I was starting this life for myself. And a problem I think we face a lot is that alcohol has become so mainstream that all of these risky behaviors. I remember working as a bartender at one of the first restaurants I worked at. We left in the middle of our shift while the band was playing. It was a packed house, left in the middle of the shift, walked down the street because one of our bartenders worked at another bar down the street and he would get us more drinks. Went and got drinks, came back. I mean, absolutely wasted. I got people's credit cards. I got all kinds of cash, just out of my mind wasted. And it was funny. It was like we all laughed about it. I got fired, but we all laughed about it. Ha ha, like no big deal,
Right.
But it was just, there was no indication from anyone outside of, me to say, hey, maybe this behavior is a little off, until I started to have issues in my relationship. A lot of my drinking stemmed from having no self-esteem, no self-worth. I was constantly cheating, being unfaithful, just constant turmoil. And the relationship was extremely toxic. Neither of us were just aware enough to know it at the time. But I derived self-worth from the way people wanted me. So whether that be women or men, if somebody wanted me, I was going to seek that out because that would make me feel good about myself. Later on in life, through lots of therapy, realized that a lot of that was just having no real identity within myself of who I truly was. Moving a lot kind of contributed to that. And it's a weird thing because I think me moving a lot made me an extremely adaptable person. I can kind of fit into any crowd. I can talk to anybody. I'm not a shy person at all. A lot of that's my personality, but a lot of that's my upbringing. But then on the flip side, I was constantly moving. Every 2 to 3 years, we were uprooted into a new place. And it created these kind of habits of, I knew I could do really destructive, crazy things, and I never had to deal with the consequences of it because we were going to go. And you better believe I kept that cycle up for years, for decades. And so now I'm in a place where I'm rooted. I'm here in Georgia. I can't just up and leave. But what I can do is just drink away the issue. It's not an issue. I'm just going to drink. Like, I don't have to deal with it. And if I have to deal with it, I'm just going to blame the alcohol. Oh, I was too drunk. I'm sorry. I'll try to do better next time. And because of the toxicity within that relationship, she continued to stay, even though it was very obvious that we shouldn't be together. So when the relationship issues really started to rear their ugly head, we had this really, really big fight, and it shouldn't have been a fight. I came home after a shift and I had my bottle of vodka and sat down to go drink it. And my partner at the time said, "Hey, why don't we not drink tonight? Like, why do we have to drink every night?" And I flipped out. I was like, "How dare you? I'm a grown woman. I'm going to do whatever I want to do." I went and broke every dish in the kitchen, literally opened the drawers, opened the cabinet doors, and was just knocking stuff out. I had already been drinking at work and I wanted to drink more. I remember I left the house, I walked around the street, I was just mad. And I came home, I went to bed, we didn't talk. And I woke up the next morning and I thought, why did I get so mad? Like, she didn't say, "No, you can't drink." She just asked a question. "Maybe not tonight. Maybe we don't drink tonight. What do you think?" And it really kind of got the wheels turning for me. I was in my early 20s at this point, and the thought of potentially having a problem with drinking was starting to kind of roll around in my head, but I would just push it away, you know? This is the first time I went to therapy because of this incident, and I wanted to really kind of get to the root of what was going on here. It was the first time I really addressed my sexual abuse as a child and kind of got to the root of that. Started kind of delving into the identity stuff and who I was as a person outside of all of this other stuff. And she challenged me to 30 days without drinking. And I said, "You got it. I can do this." And I absolutely did. I went 30 days. And then on day 31, I celebrated with a handle of vodka. And in my mind, there was no issue with that. I had proved that I wasn't an alcoholic because I went 30 days, and that was that. And I continued my drinking just as I was. And again, nobody, even when I got sober, I had people come to me and be like, "You're full of shit. You were never an alcoholic." Like, no, I went to school with you. You graduated college. I bought a house in my early 20s. I got married, had a child, had a successful career in corporate America. There's no way. But the world is set up to kind of help alcoholics along. Let's be real. You know, I went to college, and that was absolutely okay in that culture to party all the time. I mean, making hunch punch and just everybody passing out at somebody's house and wondering where you're at, and none of that's unusual. You know, went to in the insurance industry is the industry that I am in, which work comp specifically for me, which is heavy in happy hours. And I mean, I would get bottles of champagne and wine as Christmas gifts from vendors and partners. Just, you know, anytime we have any networking event, you were guaranteed there was going to be free alcohol. So I was able to continue my alcoholism right along with my, you know, successful life without anybody batting an eye.
No, that's no, because that's interesting you said about the 30 days, because it made me think about when I went to treatment the first time back in 2008, and it was like, all right, well, I'm gonna do this 30 days. And like the day my nephew picked me up from rehab, I was like, let's go to the liquor store, because it was like, okay, I fulfilled what my family told me to do. Now I'm gonna go back to what it is I wanted to do. So I felt that completely. Now, now, you know, obviously you you did the 30 days. Now, but what led it to the point where, you know, obviously you continued to drink? You know, you were addressing a lot of different issues. You're addressing issues from, you know, trauma from your past of growing up, and you know, your therapist is telling you to do the 30 days. You go ahead and you drink. Now, I guess it's more or less, you know, kind of fast forward a little bit. You know, what was like the breaking point or the dealing point where, you know, did you run into legal issues? You know, knock on wood. I spent a night in jail. I'm not, you know, ashamed to say it. You know, I should have had probably over 50 DUIs, if not more. But what was your boiling point to where it was like, okay, yeah, I really and truly need to work on this?
Absolutely. My actual breaking point was a horrible reason to quit. I wanted to save my marriage.
Mm.
We were like 7 years into marriage and 15 years into a relationship. We had a child together, and I had cheated once again. And I once again said, hey, this is so much to do with alcohol and not to do with me. But because alcohol is such a big deal, I'm going to stop. Like, I'm going to stop. We had kind of separated. I had gone to my parents' house to just give her some space, to give myself some space while we kind of started this process of what was going to happen. And I said, if I want to truly give my marriage the best shot, I have to stop drinking. Now, I realized pretty quickly I can't stop drinking for anybody else, but something happened to me on the 15th. So March 14th is when I went to my parents' house and said, I'm going to do this. And on the 15th, I drank that night, obviously. And then on the 15th, it's cold outside, cold for Georgia. And I'm sitting out on my parents' pool deck, and I'm lounging in this chair, just kind of like bawling my eyes out, contemplating my life. And a dragonfly comes and lands on my foot and just sits there. And I took it as a sign. I took it as a sign from the universe, from my higher power, saying, hey, you're on the right track. Keep this up and let's see how your life changes. And that's exactly what I did. I very soon realized there wasn't any saving of my marriage, and that was the right thing to do, but that I was going to stay sober for me. Now, we did try. We stayed together for another 9 months. The first 9 months of my sobriety, we were trying to save my marriage. But the more I got sober, the more I started to kind of really address these issues. And I realized this is not where I need to be. And I'm going to be more successful doing this on my own. We still co-parent. We have a child together. I don't blame her whatsoever for leaving. I'm honestly surprised we lasted for that long. Honestly, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that situation, because I don't know if another situation would have come up, because I'd never had issues with the law. I never had issues with work and drinking. I never had issues with friends and drinking. It was not a problem per se in my life. It wasn't causing issues in my life, but it was. And those issues were the fact that I had, like I said, no self-worth, no love for myself. I wasn't Christina. I was just this shell of a person going through the motions every day and drinking, so I didn't have to deal with anything. I had zero coping mechanisms. So I am very grateful for the fact that was the catalyst that got me to where I am today.
That's what's up. Now, are you involved at all, like, during that process? Well, first off, thank you for sharing that, because I think it is important in terms of in a relationship that, it sounded like you took your power back. And,
that's right.
Being that, like you said, you lost your self-worth, you lost a part of your identity during that time that you were drinking. And now you realize, okay, yes, you've been with this person for quite some time, but that it just wasn't it. What I mean? And I'm kind of dealing with that. So I'm understanding completely with what you're saying. Like that's real, because like I said, sometimes in sobriety, we have to be selfish. We have to do what's best for us, and not necessarily what's best for others and what others may think of us if we do it this way. So I think that is definitely key, and thank you for sharing that. Now,
absolutely.
You mentioned something about constantly moving around. Now, does that mess with your anxiety at all? Sometimes I know you said you can adapt to different environments, but sometimes I know for me, like when I moved to Florida, I was out there alone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it messed with my mental, because it was like, okay, I don't have those friends and those family that's there that's gonna be supportive. Or if I'm having that day and I can get in my car, I can go to them. You know,
Yeah,
so how was that? I mean, I don't know if I know you said you left California and you came to Georgia. So I mean, how was it for you? I know you said you have is it a daughter you have? You have a
I
daughter?
do. I do.
Okay.
I do have a
And,
daughter. Yeah. She wasn't around yet then.
oh, okay.
Growing up, growing up, moving around a lot, it was kind of all I knew.
Mhm,
And my immediate family, my parents and my brothers were always there.
mhm,
So I didn't feel the effects of that in that moment. Now, what I should mention is I hadn't lived on my own until I was 32 years old.
mhm,
I went directly from my parents' home in with my partner, and then we were together for 15 years, and then we separated. So that feeling of what am I supposed to do now by myself? And you hit on it a little bit when you were talking about the relationships. The person that I was in that relationship no longer exists. I'm I am discovering and continuing to discover who I am and learning how to love me in all, facets of that. But, you know, that was a huge shock for me moving out of our family home, and like you just talked about going through a move right now and getting yourself situated. And I've moved technically 5 times in the past almost 2 years as I've moved out of the home that we shared together and temporarily stay with my family, and then just moving all over the place. It is stressful, and it's hard to acclimate to, and absolutely it does. I dealt with tons of feelings of just loneliness
mhm,
when I first moved out. I knew that it was the right thing to no longer be with my partner, but it was like, what am I supposed? I've always been a wife. I've always been a mother, and yes, I am still a mother, but now I'm sharing custody with my partner. So, we do week on, week off. So the weeks that I don't have my child and this apartment by myself, and yes, my parents do now live in Georgia. They're about an hour from me, but I work full time. I can't just pop over an hour whenever I want, and absolutely raise my anxiety quite a bit as I try to navigate now. How do I function as an adult on my own? Because at 32 years old, it was the first time I was doing it. So absolutely, it definitely in the beginning it was a lot of what do I do? I'm just going to sit here in this loneliness and figure it out. And I'm big on that. I used to drink away all my emotions. So now when I'm feeling an emotion, even if it's an uncomfortable one, I'm going to sit in it and I'm a process it. And that's not always fun, but it's necessary. But it really had me then lean on my sober circle. And it's funny because right around that time when all of that was happening, my sister-in-law was breastfeeding, so she wasn't drinking. My two closest friends got pregnant, so they stopped drinking. My family, my parents, my mom has never really been a big drinker. My dad still drinks, my brother still drinks, which is fine, but it made it added significance to the fact that I needed to create a circle of people that I could lean on in these times, whether they drink or not. If you can support me through what I'm doing, my goal isn't to make everybody be sober. My goal is to make everybody take a look at their relationship with alcohol and see if adjustments need to be made. But it just really drove home that, hey, I've kind of had this life that was filled with me taking care of all these other people, my job, my child, my wife. And now it's time for me to take care of me. But in doing that, I need support. And so, yes, very, very much a lot of anxiety driven in that, but anxiety that led to growth and learning.
mm. No, I just noticed something today, doing a little bit of homework before our interview, that we have something in common. And
What is that?
we both have diabetes.
We do.
Yes.
Yes.
And I wanted to touch on that briefly. Like what are some of the health risks that you've experienced from, or either before, oh, you got 10 minutes, but that's cool. Oh shoot, dang it. Now I'm sorry, let me go back.
You're good.
Um, what what are some effects that you may have experienced during either before or after you got sober?
Yeah. Yeah. So endocrine diseases, diabetes particularly, was definitely triggered through my use of alcohol. I was diagnosed with gestational diabetes when I was pregnant with my child, and that was the first ever time I had even heard that that might have been an issue. And typically with gestational diabetes, once you have your child, it goes away. Mine didn't go away. So within a year of her being born, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and obviously continued to drink through that. I later found out through my own research and through talking to my physicians that with diabetes or any endocrine disease, there's two components. There's a hereditary component. So there is some diabetes in my family, but most people aren't affected until they're older, later in their lives, 60s and older. I was in my early 20s when I was diagnosed with diabetes, but then there is always a trauma, and my trauma was alcohol. So I do still have type 2 diabetes. I take medication. Luckily, I have to be on insulin at this point, but I do still manage that with medication and my diet. That has improved greatly since I have quit drinking. I also had high blood pressure. I was diagnosed with high blood pressure at 21 years old. There is, again, high blood pressure in my family. And as a Black woman, we know that there's obviously an increased risk there as well. But I was on blood pressure medication while I was drinking for that, which I no longer have to take. So there's been a whole lot. I mean, just the common things like way better sleep, way better cognitive abilities, no more brain fog, like just the everyday thing, way better skin. My weight loss, a lot of people associate with me quitting drinking. My weight loss is really just from the stress of going through a divorce. But I've maintained that weight now through all of that. And I definitely contribute that to not drinking. But yeah, overall, my health has gotten way, way better since I quit drinking. And a lot of the health issues that I have were from my drinking.
Yeah, I can second that for real, because I just actually came from the doctor's yesterday, got another glucometer because I haven't had one in so long. But yeah, I second that in terms of when I went and got treatment or got sober this last time in 2016. I started to take serious more of my health. I had high blood pressure, high cholesterol. I weighed a whole lot more than what I weigh now, which was roughly about, I probably was about 40 to anywhere 40 to 50 pounds heavier than what I am today. The diabetes, I don't eat as much candy as I used to when I first got sober, but I'm still victim to energy drinks. But it's some type of vice, and I do think that it's important that those that are, especially us African Americans, that yes, there are some things that are hereditary that we do experience, that the characteristic traits that come down from our ancestors and family members, but there's also ways to break it. You know what I'm saying? That, we don't have to have these permanently. It could be something that's temporarily, can be reversed. It's just a matter of, fine tuning your body and making sure that, you're making your body a priority over abusing it and trying to harm yourself, needless to say. Now, you put down the alcohol. What did you replace it with?
Everything crafty, which you can't see right now. What's behind you is a whole craft center. I got 3 sewing machines. I got a Cricut cutting machine. I got all kinds of paints over here. I've always been super creative and crafty, and that was something that really helped me through sobriety. It was something about keeping my hands busy and keeping my mind occupied. So lots of crafting, and then also lots of journaling. Journaling became really, really big for me. I continued into therapy. I never went to like an inpatient or a detox, but I did start twice a week therapy with an addiction specialist. And she's still my therapist to this day. Absolutely love her. She was a therapist of mine prior to me getting sober, but we ramped it up after I got sober to help with that. But a lot of that healing process, which to me is, that's everything. You put down the alcohol and then you are just faced with everything that you haven't been dealing with. So journaling became huge in my healing process. And then just keeping my hands and my mind occupied. Yes, I also have a crazy sweet tooth in the beginning, popping lots of candy. I've always had a sweet tooth, but it definitely ramped up. I became like a coffee connoisseur. I use a French press and a pour over. Just experimenting with new ways to make coffee and turning that into a fun, exciting drink. Now that I was giving up alcohol doesn't mean that I have to never have a cool drink, So coffee became really big thing for me. But yeah, crafting, journaling, like I said, keeping my mind occupied, keeping my hands occupied.
Now, we touched on it a little bit. I'm going to ask this question before, because we're probably going to end up having to do a part 2. But I just wanted to at least kind of get started in terms of the next topic. Now, how has navigating through the Black sober community been for you?
Oh, I sober, months, right? Actively engaged in it. Mm-hmm. And the biggest thing I noticed was there weren't no Black people. What you see when you looking for sober curious or sober content, it's just all women mostly. And although there are a few accounts that I really liked and looked to for encouragement and support, I wanted to see people like me, because as a Black woman, my experience with alcoholism, my experience are different than a white woman. Mm-hmm. And so I did search and I found them, but it took a minute to find that. And one of my biggest things outside in the real world when it comes to being a sober Black woman, there's a pushback. I definitely feel like luckily in my immediate family, there's been no pushback. There's been lots of support, but on the outside, it's so ingrained. And let's be real, we know from our history that that's intentional. Alcohol being to the Black community way back in the day, intentional. So I am not shocked that it is still very much ingrained, but all of the activities surrounding things that I would do with people involved alcohol, and the Black people were the ones the hard drink. So there was definitely when it came to being sober in that community, sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it was a delay. But yeah, so, yeah, I agree, because like I know that I can't remember if I started like kind of navigating through the sober community. I'd probably say roughly it was either 2019. I think, and I noticed that nobody looked like me, and so that's kind of why like initially I didn't really interact. I kind of just followed pages, hit likes. Somebody had an sober anniversary, I would be like, congratulations, but not really interacting. And then once I had put together my book, then that's when I said, okay, maybe I'm gonna start going out there trying to seek it, but still couldn't find it. And I'd probably say roughly about a year and a half ago is when I started to like, okay, yes, there are people. Yes, okay, perfect. Now I'm trying to befriend each and every person, because I feel like, okay, we can relate. Okay, we grew up in areas where maybe, all right, this was a family member, this is known. Okay, we don't talk about these personal issues and stuff like that. But that's the reason why I was like, okay, I gotta, be somewhere navigating myself through this, because that's, I want to reach everybody, but I also want to reach my own people as well. And I think it's very important, because other groups are doing the same exact thing, but they just there's a lot more representation of other groups than it is us. So that's why, like I said, I had to make sure that you were on here, because